This is good work. I
We
love
made a
it.
new friend.
Hello and welcome to Outside the Fox, where we explore what's happening online and why it matters. I'm Kim Horcher.
And I'm Steve Flavin.
And Steve, if someone were to give you a contract and they wanted you to sign it, and what it does is it follows everything you do, everywhere you go, it analyzes that information, then it sells that information and shares it to you don't even know who, would you sign it?
I would not sign it, but I think I know where you're going with this because millions of us sign contracts like that every day, except we don't do it with a pen, we do it with a click.
Yes, terms and conditions are the contracts that run the internet, basically. However, many of us don't actually read what we're agreeing to. In fact, one study estimated that if someone actually read every terms and service agreement that they encountered in a year, it would take hundreds of hours.
Which means that companies know something important, which is that the system depends on people not reading these contracts. So that begs the question, what is buried inside of these contracts that people aren't reading?
It's a very good question. And to answer it, I don't know, but our guest today does. Please welcome Julia Janssen. Hi, Julia. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, among the numerous accolades that Julia's received, she was actually chosen as one of Mozilla's Rise 25 honorees. So, Julia, welcome. To start off, could you give us a little bit of an intro and a little bit of background on your work?
Yeah, sure. So, as an artist, I research the influence of technology, especially data, AI, and big tech on our society. And I make physical and interactive installations or performative art to make people more aware of these very opaque and very complex systems. As you already said, like nobody wants to read the privacy policies. So, I try to make these systems more tangible for people to understand and also to understand what is at stake. For example, equality or democracy or autonomy and all these values that we very much see within our physical spaces, but not always online. So, as an artist, I focus on these kind of things, and I'm also the ambassador of the Dutch Data Protection Foundation. And we do lawsuits against big tech companies like Amazon, Adobe, and X for like mass surveillance and illegal data collecting practices.
That's amazing. I've actually been to your website. I love your work, and I'm interested to know, how did you get interested in creating art that examines these different topics in technology, digital systems, and structures that hold the internet up?
Yeah, it actually originated quite early on. I didn't know it at the time, but when I was 15 years old, for some reason, I chose for my study program like higher mathematics and arts. And my counselor said to me like that doesn't make any sense. But I explained like I need art to understand mathematics, but I also need mathematics to understand art and reasoning and logic. So I think the combination of both really allows me to both imagine new ways to design the internet, but also to kind of reason and see the bigger picture of what is going on and what bottlenecks we have to take on. And in 2016, this year, 10 years ago, I graduated with an art installation saying privacy is really the commodity of the internet, and it wasn't really present yet in the public debates. My art teachers were very confused. They all said, like, why would you be concerned about this? Mark Zuckerberg was still a hero. So yeah, for some reason, I really felt like I need to stand up for this, and I really need to make these topics more present in public debate and make it visible what is actually at stake.
Awesome. Well, in 2018, you created an exhibition called One Click. Can you describe that project and what audiences experienced when they encountered it?
So, like you said in the beginning, nobody reads the privacy policies. I didn't either, because they're taking too much time, and you just want to, enter your website or your desired app. So, for some reason, I was doing some research for actually another project, and then I found out that there were some cookies installed on my computer that I didn't understand why they were there. So from there, I kind of started digging, and I visited the Daily Mail, the British news tabloid. And from there, I did something extraordinary because I didn't click on I accept, but on cookie settings. And there unfold this whole world of 835 privacy policies that you all accept with that one click when you click on I agree. So I visited all the websites manually. I copied the text and I designed this book with 835 privacy policies. And after a year of expeditioning the book, I felt like maybe we need to do something like bigger with it. So I built this pop-up radio studio, which is called 0.0146 seconds. And from there, I invite people to read from the book. So it's a traveling exhibition. It's a read out loud collective performance where people step in and read from the book for 12 minutes and literally like give their voice. It's kind of almost a passive protest, you can say it, or a way to kind of show like this is no way to get informed consent.
So you did something unique, and I'm not talking about the art. You were reading and analyzing what we were actually agreeing to in terms and conditions. So, what did you learn about them that most people don't know?
So I think content-wise, I wasn't really surprised. But this massive infrastructure, that was really surprising for me, to be honest, because I really didn't know about this network, which is everywhere. And I think when you start realizing that these conditions are not for the user, but to legally safeguard companies, because one of the foundations to collect personal data is giving informed consent. And I think that is something to be questioned here, because you can't really understand what you give your consent for. Companies now use that to protect themselves, saying like, well, you given consent, so you have no rights anymore.
So why do you think that art is a useful way to explore something like digital contracts?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, art is a beautiful way to make these very complex and far distant topics tangible for people to understand. We're constantly going to the internet on a rapid speed, and I think it's also the way that it's designed. So these buttons, they're annoying, so you just click them away. I think for people to realize to sit down to do something that you will never take time for in your daily life. So I think that kind of was interesting to play with.
So, your work is beyond art as well. You mentioned earlier on, and I'd love to touch back, that you have taken part in legal action against major tech companies in Europe. How was that transition, and what made you decide to work that way as well?
I was never really an artist for gallery spaces. I was always trying to have my work in public spaces or at festivals or a tech conference or political conferences. So I think from there, it really allowed me to also enter that space and to get in contact with very interesting people in the field who are not only bad people, but also amazing people who are working on like super cool things. So after a while, I think it was 2021, I get a very vague email saying like, okay, hi, we're building a team to make some noise against big tech. Are you interested in joining? So after a couple of like secretive meetings and signing a lot of NDAs and having first some very unclear talks about what was really going on, I signed, and then they said like, okay, so we're suing Twitter. And I was like, oh, okay, this is something else. So after working on that in secret for about a year, then we became public with the first case, which was then against X, because over that year Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed the name. So it was kind of a roller coaster, to be honest. We now have 3 cases against X, Amazon, and Adobe, because I think we all agree that it's time to also really take action and not only agree with each other that there's something off.
Quick follow up, can we be best friends?
I would love that.
This is good work.
We made a new friend. Rewinding back a little bit, as you reflect on OneClick back in 2018, right, which seems like eons ago, it's the before times. Have things improved at all in terms of transparency, or have things gotten worse?
Yeah, I think things definitely changed. The public debate around it changed. It became very present that tech and political power are merging, and that we're more scared of that, or at least we're more aware of kind of what is at stake. So I feel like there we've won a lot of ground. But I think what really didn't change is the system itself. We see that we now have a diverse choice in how we want our cookies to be collected. Now you have options saying like, oh yes, I do want my functional cookies, but not third party, and no analytical cookies. But I think it only got worse by doing that, because now people have to even more click on more buttons, and then they switched up buttons, so you're still clicking on accept everything. So I feel like they made it so much more difficult and so much worse actually than from before, when it was just two options, which was also still not working. So I think we really should reimagine how this consent structure work, because this is definitely not it. But I think about the one click project, recently I coincidentally kind of looked into the Daily Mail again, because I felt like the project became quite famous. It had a lot of media attraction. So I felt like maybe Daily Mail or DMG Media, they want to make a good example out of themselves and change it. But it actually got worse as well, because from the 835 trackers they placed in 2018, they now place 1,200 something something. And I think this is hilarious, right? So you try to make a point, you really want to show how toxic and how inflicting and how also illegal this actually is, and then they just make it bigger.
I had my suspicions, and it's so much worse than I thought. Julia, after studying all of these different agreements and the topic of informed consent, how has that personally affected how you handle terms and conditions and your privacy online?
Yeah, I actually think that you touch on a very important thing there, where I really want to make a stand that this is not an individual problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we shouldn't address it as an individual problem or an individual action that you can take. Um, I think this whole system is designed to hoard your data from all over the internet and combine that for profiling. And if you want to enforce your rights, then that's on you. But the thing is, that's very, very complex. And to put that whole burden on the individual internet user, I think that is actually what is wrong with also the GDPR, but also the lacking of the implementation of these rights. So I think what's happening all the time is that the narrative is that if you want to be safe online, if you want your data to be protected, if you want privacy, then you shouldn't use this app. You should use a VPN or an app blocker, or you should deny cookies. But the thing is, sometimes when you're actively denying cookies, they still place them, hence our Amazon case. But also, a lot of app blockers, they only make it worse for you because they can also trade in data sometimes. And I think that's super unfair. It's just too much for people to understand that and also know how to navigate these complex systems. So I think there we really should not put in we really should not put the responsibility with the individual user, but on the system. It's really time for the industry, but also for politics to take responsibility in by default making the internet a safer space, a data protected space, and a privacy friendly space. In Dutch, we say, een geklutst ei is immers geklutst, which roughly translate as you can't unbeat an egg. Like once an egg is beaten, it's beaten. You can't unbeat it. So once data is part of a system, you can't get it out. And I think now, especially with AI, they're saying like you have to opt out before this time, otherwise all your comments, your photos, everything was within our trading system. Or they're not even giving you this option and they're just annexing it. Can we create online spaces, not like an anonymous browser? That's not the same, but like real safe spaces where actually your data is not collected and where you're not part of a profiling algorithm who's constantly calculating your next step.
Well, as we're winding this down, we got to know what's next. What's on the horizon? What other projects are you pursuing?
I just debuted a new work which is called Chatting in Davos during the World Economic Forum. So I'm touring with that piece as well. It's about how AI is kind of making reality into confident sounding plausibilities, and how sponsored answers are now entering chatbot conversations. So I think that's something that I really find very passionate about as well and want to explore more. So, and touching upon Davos, something that I really want to share there is what I found so interesting being there with during the World Economic Forum with all the world leaders and richest people in the world and industry leaders. I found it so extraordinary that the whole presence of the village was about AI is inevitable. It's there. We all need to make a business model out of it. It's here, so we all better make it work. There was no questioning of like, do we really like want this? Is it a solution to everything? No, it was just jump on this train and make a business model before it's you're too late. Also with like predictive AI, we're becoming so comfortable with living within these margins of algorithms, because I feel like also the world and the internet and everything is becoming so complex. Like there's endless choice, whether it's on a dating app or whether it's for a new bag or a new hair product. There is so much to consume. So we lean on these algorithms and these targeting algorithms, but also generative AI to kind of navigate us through the complexity and the endless possibilities of the internet, because I feel like there's just too much. And I think that's quite interesting. And it's an interesting space for me to research. I mean, we can do very cool things with data and with AI, but completely designing this whole infrastructure and like collecting all these data and all this machine power to just target you with ads, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Exactly. This
Yeah.
has been so eye-opening. Julia, thank you so much for talking to us about our questions and walking through your work and the very important ideas behind it. It's staggering to actually visualize what we're agreeing to and doing every day and how that upholds the internet as we know it.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Wow, that was so interesting, and really touched a nerve for me when she was talking about cookie banners.
Mm-hmm.
That is the bane of my existence, going in, and like the worst are the kind that say, by continuing to use this site, you've agreed to the cookies. But you know what? Cookies are off by default in Firefox, so that is a bunch of BS. And speaking of which, we also rolled out AI controls in Firefox, so you don't have to use AI if you don't want to. We got an easy off switch. So just thought I'd give a little plug.
And I have a question for you, audience. When you're signing up for your next app or service, are you actually going to scroll down and hit I agree without reading? Or will you take a moment, pause, and think about what that actually means? Let us know in the comments.
That's right. And don't forget to subscribe and download Firefox, because you know it's the best. We'll see you next time.